Commissioner McKiernan, are you online with us?
I am.
Wonderful. Everybody ready? Well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. I will now call the meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone this evening. Public comment is always welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. We ask that you please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into the microphone. At this time, I would ask clerk to call roll.
Roll call: Walters.
Here.
Murguia. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
And Burrows.
Here. With that, the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from September 30th. Is there a motion for approval?
For approval.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
like sign. Thank you, Brian. Seeing no opposition, the motion passes. Next, we have 6 items on the agenda this evening. The first consists of land bank business, and we'll ask Chris Slaughter to present the land bank business. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Commissioners. Tonight, first, we have one application. It's for a new construction of a single-family house. The applicant is current on their taxes, and there's no code violations. This lot is 4011 South Minnie Street. It's over on your far right, there in red. And there's a picture of the existing lot. So again, it'll be a single-family house, about a little bit under 11,000 or 1,100 square feet, and it will consist of 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. So our request is for you to approve and forward for final approval to the board.
Move to approve.
Motion been made and seconded to approve. First of all, I have to ask the public, is there any comments from the public at this time to address this issue? Let the record show no one stepped forward. Hearing none. We've had a motion. I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call: Walters. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
And Burrows.
Aye. Item number 2 is transfer from the land bank.
Yes, we have a transfer at 950R South 25th Street, and as you can see, it's here in red. It's a small sliver. This request would be a transfer to the Kaw Valley Drainage District. With the Levy project kicking off, they are going to relocate a maintenance facility, and this strip of land will give them greater access to that new building. So the request is approval to be forwarded for the board for final consideration.
Any questions or
Commissioner
comments?
Burrows, I
Yes.
just wanted to follow up. So as part of the levee improvements that we're doing along the Kansas River, Kaw Valley Drainage District is having to vacate its current facility. So we've been working with them to identify other locations, and luckily we're only having to provide this little strip of basically easement back to a parcel that they already have access to. So this has turned out good for them and good for us, and so hopefully we can get this moving and get them out of the way for the project.
So what we have is government working at its best.
Correct.
Any comments from the committee? Any comments from the public? Let the record show no one has stepped forward. At this time, I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. I will ask the clerk call roll.
Roll call: Walters. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
And Burrows.
Aye. Okay. On to,
So now we have a transfer to the land bank. This property is 520 Everett and is the green parcel there on your map. So we currently, for a majority of the land bank property here on the eastern part of Turtle Hill, we have option agreements in place for some multifamily housing project. And this would just add to that square footage. So Again, once approved for transfer, we would enter into an option agreement, and eventually, once that project's ready to move forward, we would presume all these parcels that are under option would be presented at one time.
Is that the last large parcel available there?
What do you mean by last available?
The red that, next to the green,
That's currently land bank.
that's currently land bank. Okay. So we do have other properties still available there.
Correct, but a majority of these have option agreement with the same entity, and they're just also requesting the one in green that is currently in the city's name.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Does anyone from the public wish to address this item? So please come forward. Please let the record show no one stepped forward. At this time, I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. I would ask clerk call roll.
Roll call Walters. Townsend.
Aye.
McKernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Next item is we have 4 donation requests to the land bank. 2831 North 26th Street from Joan Bauman. 2418 North 11th Street from Gwendolyn Sharp. 1302 South 38th Street from C.R. Lee Jr. And 3520 Delavan Avenue from A. Porter Gayton. So the first one is 2831 North 26. It's located here in green on your map. These are existing land bank properties, and the blue is a Bordia County Commissioner property. As you can see, it's kind of nestled here behind the existing houses here on 26th Street. We wouldn't anticipate an immediate use for it, but with the other land bank parcels, it would just be one continuous lot that maybe someday could be used.
Can you tell us why it's being donated?
Yes. The current owner lives out of state. She states that she inherited the property. She doesn't want it or can take care of the property. She does owe 2016 taxes, and this was presented to the LAM team, and they expressed their approval. Next property is 2418 North 11th Street, and that's again outlined in green. There's a current picture of the property. The owner currently lives in Wichita. Again, states doesn't want or can take care of the property. The owner is current on their taxes, and again, the LAM team did approve. Next one is 1302 South 38th Street, and that again is outlined in green on your map. Current picture of the property. Another out-of-state owner states they can't take care of the property. Owner is current on their taxes, and this again was approved by the LAM team. And the last one is 3520 Delavan Avenue in green. This does have an improvement on it. And this was about the best picture I could get. So the house is currently being cited for being unfit and not being boarded. They earlier attempted through Catholic Charities, Habitat, I think they even reached out to one of those We Buy Ugly Houses, and basically they were all unsuccessful because the cost that the person would have to put into the property just didn't make sense for them. They are current on their taxes. If received, we would definitely do an open house to see if anybody would want to take this on. But if not, if we receive no interest, then if we took possession, we would request that it be demoed. The LAM team did look at this also and approved. So those are the 4 requests tonight for approval, and if approved, we'll move to the board for final approval.
Any questions or comments from the committee? I have a question. Those 3, the last 3 properties, what is the procedure when we take property that they're current on their taxes? Do we send a notice expressing their appreciation for keeping this cost-effective versus us taking in a loss because they're delinquent on their taxes? Do we send any kind of a letter or anything like that to the property owners?
We generally don't. They're usually thrilled enough that we take the property off their hands, so.
Okay. And the last property that you talked about that we could end up having to raise that property?
That is one of the possibilities, yes.
An additional cost to clean it up besides just the demolition?
Correct. The city could also move forward to raise it, would be additional expenses still paid, and so either way, the city's going to be on the hook to tear this down.
Do we give consideration to the additional costs of demolition in reference to the long-term cost to the county? You know, we're losing a tax base, and because they are current on their taxes, but we're going to take possession, then we're going to lose that tax base plus the additional dollars. Do we take those? Do we have the authority to deny taking those?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a certain percentage or a certain number that triggers us not to accept a piece of property?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I think it really comes down to, do we get it now? Do we get it later? Do we raise it now? Do we raise it later? The owners have not indicated that anything to me that if they couldn't get this donated, that they would go ahead and have it raised themselves. So
Okay.
I'm going to assume that they're not willing to pay for that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Well, I just have a little bit of a question along those same lines. So I guess what I hear you saying is if we don't take it, it's just going to sit there.
Until I think the city would then move in through the further citations and start the demo process. I'm not an expert on how their procedures work, but I would assume if it's being touted as unfit and the owner's lack of being able to keep it boarded is going to eventually come into play where the city's going to act.
I was thinking that you were going to tell us that we would live with it for 3 years until it was delinquent, and then we would take it or something.
I mean,
It's not a good future.
I mean, the positive thing is hopefully someone can look at that beyond the damage and think that structurally it's still sound and they'd be willing to take it and rehab it.
Okay. Could I ask you about the third property? It seems like a fairly buildable area, lot. Why can that not be sold on the market? Do you have any idea about that?
I don't know if the owner has attempted that, but again, I think the owner did live out of state, and I think sometimes they'd rather just walk away from it.
I think this goes back to Commissioner Murguia's comments about buildable lots having using a for sale sign to demonstrate that we have a buildable lot and that potential to increase the value of that property.
So we could accept this and tomorrow put it up for sale and sell it perhaps.
I mean, we would definitely probably market that. If we go back to the street map, and with me being out there today, I mean, the houses on that block were all in pretty good condition, so I think it's a pretty strong neighborhood. You know, the question would be is, do we sell it as one, or do we look at it splitting it in half and maybe try to get two builders there? So I think it's rare on a donation request that we get something of this size and in something of a good, strong neighborhood. But definitely our plan would be is to market this for sale for a new home.
I move for approval of all four properties.
We do have a question, Commissioner.
Well, it's more a comment, and I will second that. Even though we really don't like to see lots, either improved or unimproved, come into the land bank, to me, these four examples were four examples of a good use. Not the best thing, but the owners, particularly those who live out of town, that presents a lot of problems with upkeep. Then we get calls from neighbors if those owners out of town decide, well, I'm not going to do anything with it anyway. This supports our Soar project. So it's not the best thing when we see people leave, but at least they have come forward and have not compounded a problem or tried to head off problems with unsightly lots. And then the options for rehab possibility or sale, as the commissioners have already said, sound reasonable. So I've already seconded the motion.
There has been a motion and a second to approve as presented. At this time, I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. Okay, I believe this is the last item for Mr. Slaughter.
We have one more. We have the rehab update.
Yes, this is the last one though, right?
Yes. Unless you'd like me to.
No, you're good. Please, we always like to hear the update here.
Okay. So as our program continues to get the word out, we continue to get new contractors. We're currently up to 183. The number of houses has dropped down to 62. We do anticipate by next meeting that will go up based on receiving the houses we're going to get from the August sale. So I think we're anticipating getting that deed this week. The houses with no offers stands at 1. Demos completed, we are now up to 41. Houses recommended for demo is now down to 10. Houses with rehab started, we are at 50. We have no currently waiting to be closed. And we are now up to 48 completed rehabs, and we're going to highlight a couple of those here tonight. 3001 North 40th Street. I think we're used to seeing these type of pictures. And this is the completed front of the house. Inside, it's a very small house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. And there's the laundry room. So this property was in tax sale 337 back in December of 2017. The minimum bid at the time was almost $3,300. This took 16 and a half months. I kind of want to mention that this rehabber, about halfway through, had her contractor run out on her, taking some money from her. So we got her in contact with another rehabber contractor in our group, and they agreed to help out and finish things out. So she was extremely thrilled with that. When we took it on, it was appraised at a little over $10,000, and currently it's under contract for about $119,000. And the last one we'll touch on tonight is 706 North 10th Street. This is just right across 10th from the funeral home, over there about 10th and Barnett. Again, stop me if you've seen these before. This is a current picture of the house completed. And again, another small house, 2 bathrooms, 1 bath. And they put a nice fence up. There's the one on the left is looking back towards the alley, and there's looking towards 10th Street. So this was in tax sale 331 in August of 2018 with about $17,600 in back taxes. This was 7.5 rehab time. When we got it, it was appraised a little over $18,000, and it's currently being listed for $100. So that's the presentation for you tonight.
And I'd just like to add really quick, sorry. So we see the contractor lists keep growing, and as you can see, we have very few houses, which is, something which is both good and bad for our program. But I would like to point out that the house that, or the future home that Chris mentioned earlier, so if someone is actually building on, new construction on a vacant lot, that is someone who started out as a contractor in the rehab program and has used the rehab program to actually grow in their assets and ability, and now are able to actually start from scratch and build a new house. So we're hoping that this is a trend that we see with more contractors, so they can go from rehabbing our land bank homes to actually building new on vacant lots.
Well, what you pointed out raised a question with me. It seems like we have a lot of contractors who are interested in this program, but we don't have very many houses available, but we have a lot of tax delinquent property. And I think the program is wonderfully successful. I guess my question is, how could we double or triple the program's capacity?
I don't want to speak for legal, but, I mean, I guess you can go tell everybody not to bid at the tax sale next week.
Well, okay.
But, I mean,
Another option?
the tax sale's great because we are getting private citizens buying those properties, and for the most, they are fixing them up as well.
Yeah.
But, we're left at the mercy of the tax sale. I know I've mentioned this to you plenty of times, but, the good thing having the low numbers is I've received plenty of calls from our regular rehabbers saying, when are we getting the next houses? So the ones that we'll be able to put up and get offers on, I anticipate getting strong offers on, and we probably in a couple months, we'll be right back to a very low inventory. But for what we're having to work with, that's a good thing too, so.
Well, this is a wonderful time to be in the real estate business. So, sales are strong and demand is strong. So I hope we're doing everything we possibly can to take advantage of that. Thank you.
So the SOAR program was implemented prior to my opportunity to serve. How many homes did you say have been completed under the SOAR program?
Completed rehabs, 48.
48, and with that, it comes an increased tax base,
Right.
as well as filling in the neighborhoods with homes that have in the past been boarded up, or very few of them were slated for demolition. Those that were slated for demolition that has occurred. So what we're seeing is we're getting rid of the decay and at the same time investing in the neighborhoods through the SOAR program. And I agree, I think it's a great program, and kudos to you and those that have been involved. It's something we take great pride in.
Commissioner, I just also wanted to add that through this year, we've also worked really hard with our land asset management team, with Catherine and Chris, to further try to erode the number of demolitions we do. So we're having a harder core look at what would be on the demo list. We actually went back to our demolition list and removed quite a few properties off the demolition list, because we realized with the work that has been done with the land bank that these homes can be saved, and there's ways to have enough value in the community to make that happen. So with each one of these, we're creating strength in our neighborhoods, and we're creating comps that we desperately need.
Wonderful. Okay, this was for information only. No action is necessary. I want to thank Chris and Catherine for this program this evening, your information. I do have a public agenda item, committee. We have the appearance of Catherine Irwin regarding contracts for deeds. So, Ms. Irwin, if you would please come to the microphone, state your name and city of residency for the record, and you will be given up to 5 minutes to make your comments.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Catherine Irwin. I'm a resident of Kansas City, Kansas, and I'm currently the acting president of the South Argentine Neighborhood Association. When I first made my request to speak about 8 weeks ago, I very naively assumed that I was the only one who was aware of this contract for deed issue when I became aware of it in my neighborhood in an effort to identify new members for our neighborhood association. In conversations with the folks that I would meet at the door who would tell me that they were the homeowner and working on the property and raising their children there, it became very clear very quickly that they were not the deed owner. They did not get the tax statements, and I was very curious as to why. And it turns out it was because they were the purchasers in what are known as contract for deeds, land contracts, rent-to-own transactions, whatever name you want to put on them. And in doing so, I did a lot of research that I came to the conclusion that many of you may already be aware of, is that when you're a purchaser in a contract for deed, and specifically these were contracts for deeds that were not made of record in the Register of Deeds office, is they expose the purchasers in these transactions to a number of risks, including no public record of their interest in these properties, which would allow the owner of them or the seller in this land contract to sell the property without notice to them or their permission. It requires an inability to apply for residential building permits, meaning any improvement they did to the property would not have any oversight from the county. It created roadblocks to convey these contract for deed interests in probate proceedings, amongst many other issues that others are familiar with more than I. So me thinking I was the canary in the coal mine was very naive of me. And after I placed this request to speak before you, a number of incredible members of the unified government and public entities reached out to me very promptly to let me know that I was not alone. And I was actually one of many, 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 many people who have known of this problem in Wyandotte County since at least 2001, if not earlier. And amongst them was Register of Deed Nancy Burns, who is present here today, Assistant County Administrators Criswell and Sieben, the members of the Wyandotte County Association of Realtors, Community Housing of Wyandotte County, El Centro, the Argentine Betterment Corporation, Rosedale Development Corporation, as well as my acting commissioner and commissioner-elect in District 3. They provided an immense amount of counsel, along with the actual counsel of the legal department, to let me know that there were many people who were already working on this and would love for some help. And the conclusion that most of them had come to is that Wyandotte County and the unified government, as much as they wanted to help purchasers and vendors alike in these land contracts who currently have no consumer protections at all, we simply do not have the jurisdiction. It is the interpretation of state law that county governments do not have the jurisdiction to regulate what are state-level real estate transactions, and that any sort of work that we were to do outside of the existing regulation that is covered in our rental licensing ordinance would require state-level legislation. Now, for a simple resident like me, I, of course, was actually quite excited because that means I get to bother some state legislators too, amongst other people than the Wyandotte County administrators, and was happy to find that we would not be the first state to try and do this. We would be amongst many good peers, including Illinois, Texas, Minnesota, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maine, Iowa, and Oklahoma, just to name a few. And the only existing restriction currently in Wyandotte County, like I said, is this rental licensing ordinance. And the teeth in that ordinance is mostly that if you are an out-of-state or a non-owner occupant owner, it requires that you have a rental license on the property unless you can prove that you have a contract for deed transaction, which makes them go through Ms. Burns' office. Now, when I did a kind of preliminary look at what my neighborhood looks like, we have 63 non-owner occupant properties out of 318, which in the southern part of Kansas City, Kansas is actually pretty good. And of those 63, only 10 have rental licenses, 2 have contract for deeds on them, and the rest of them, we're not really sure. All we know is that the person living in them is not the owner, and that can mean a lot of different things. So unlike some who stand before you just complaining that they have neighbors who don't own their homes and think they do, and it makes you really sad like it does me, we've got a plan. And I've got county administrators who have been incredibly kind in helping me formulate that plan. And so it kind of looks like 2 things. One is, it looks like we're going to have to craft some legislation and bother some state legislators, which I'm more than happy to do. Topeka's not too bad. And so my thoughts is that the Illinois state law, which I did not bring for you on purpose because I'm hoping to make it a little bit better, is going to be the basis of what we're going to strive for. And the reason for that is the Illinois state law is really formulated as a consumer protection law. It would not require an immense amount of additional unified government resources to actually empower that law. What it really does is let the purchasers and vendors alike basically give teeth to their own private contracts and make them of record so that there is no conveyances that do not already have those memorialized equitable interests involved in that transaction. In addition to that, of course, there's already teeth in our rental licensing ordinance that we can beef up. This effort was already underway when I showed up, again, naive canary in coal mine theory, that Assistant County Administrator Stephen was well underway. And in accordance with our SOAR goal, we're hoping to increase those rental licenses, and that will include not only in the future identifying those properties that are investment properties quicker, but also using what is going to be an immense effort to figure out which ones are already in place and unlicensed, like the 53 just in the half mile around my house. And so this today is less of a request and more of an FYI that I will be showing up more often, probably with some legislation in hand for your thoughts and review, and that I'm hoping that we will not go another 20 years without helping my neighbors, one of which was actually evicted from her contract for deed house just 3 days ago, along with her 4 young children. So thank you. I appreciate your time. I welcome any questions. And I'm excited about this land bank stuff. It's pretty neat. I tried to buy one down the street from me, but my neighbor beat me to it. But that's okay.
Any questions of Humphrey? Commissioner Townsend?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
So, first of all, I'll try to keep this brief because I don't know how long this voice will last. But, Ms. Irwin, I want to thank you very much for coming forward, and you have identified something that truly is a significant problem for a number of residents of our community. And I'm glad that you've been introduced to the team within the unified government who are working to try to get in front of this so that we can protect the residents of our county from people who would otherwise try to take advantage of them. And it is, unfortunately, a very big problem because there are a lot of people who make it their life's work to stay off of our radar and stay out of our vision to escape the oversight that would otherwise come and protect the people living in their structures. So I'm glad to have you on our team. I'm excited that we have somebody in the community who can begin to educate neighbors about this problem. And like you, I know many people firsthand who have been taken advantage of enormously in this regard. And it truly would be great if we could, as a community, do something to reduce the risk borne by people who simply want to live here in a good quality house. And if I could just take this opportunity, since I have the floor, to circle back to something Commissioner Walters brought up earlier about putting more houses into our land bank rehab program. One of the things that we have talked about, but we really, again, don't have leverage, just like this contract for deed, we don't have leverage on this. And those are properties that are tax current, but otherwise abandoned and not cared for and not occupied and creating blight and should be somehow turned into livable homes. So anyway, Ms. Irwin, thank you so much. Thanks for being on our team.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. Ms. Irwin, I echo Commissioner McKiernan's sentiments. Specifically, since you have identified, you've done a lot of homework, it's clear, could you identify for us a couple of the things in the Illinois legislative actions that would specifically help people who are in these contract for deed situations?
Sure. So just to give some brief history, if you're not kind of familiar with contract for deed themselves, when you're in a contract for deed transaction, the agreed upon price, the condition of the property, whether or not it's tax updated, all these different things are not a part of that contract. The owner, typically, they're actually advertised most commonly on Facebook, is they're saying, you know, an owner-to-owner sale, it costs you this much down, this much payments a month, it's going to be your house. And so if you were to go buy a house on the real estate market, there would be a seller's disclosure of the current property. You would know who owned it, that the person you were signing actually had title to convey to you, that they were current on taxes, there was no code violations, all these litanies of different consumer protections that govern traditional real estate transactions. And that just simply doesn't exist for contract for deeds. It's not at all required. And so what Illinois did, for instance, is they basically extended traditional real estate processes to contract for deed, rent-to-own, seller financing transactions. So a seller-financed transaction or contract for deed requires the same thing that a traditional one would. The purchaser is able to get an appraisal. The purchaser is able to get an inspection. The seller must provide a disclosure. They must provide your lead paint disclosures, all those very important things that you would see, as well as there is an obligation on the seller's part to convey that information truthfully and in whole to the best of their knowledge. Whereas, as of now, contract for deed purchasers and sellers have no obligation really at all to one another. There's no enforcement mechanism that forces the seller in that transaction to be truthful and to even divulge this information. And so Illinois has a laundry list, probably 30 or 40 different obligations on the seller's part to say, this is how much the taxes were last year, this is what your payment will be, the interest rate that you're paying, when you will take over ownership, an agreement upon which repairs are required, and what agreement has taken place on either side. So let's say you need to replace a roof. There's an agreement in advance of which party will have to repair that. Typically, as of now, the purchaser in this contract wears that burden wholly. And so if you were presuming that people seeking contract for deed transactions cannot procure traditional financing, the presumption that they could wear a $4,000 roof expense is unlikely at best. And typically, a lack of upkeep on a home is a defaultable issue for a contract for deed transaction. So the vendor could evict that person for not repairing the roof. And that's kind of the power for these people who go into these. And largely, and this is a broad stroke I'm going to paint here, I would say in my research, almost 90% of contract for deeds are predatory in some way. 4 out of 5 in Kansas are never satisfied. Now, somebody who's entering these transactions must know that the likelihood is that the person they're selling their home to is 80% of the time not going to actually get through the whole thing. And for a 30-year contract, there's no payoff period. There's either you pay it off or you don't have anything. You just have to walk away. And that was an example in my neighborhood that kickstarted this whole thing. Is the mother died, she was the contract holder. Because it was not of record, it could not be conveyed in probate. So it just sat in the ether. And her son wanted to move out of the house or sell the house to get something larger for his children. And he couldn't. He had $19,000 left on the contract to pay off. So there's no building of equity. There's all these different things that were in Illinois is created. After 6 months, you're making equity. There's seller's protections. It must be recorded or it's void. There's different purchasers' protections as well. And it just gives teeth and the ability for both parties, because Nancy Burns can attest that the issue can be on both sides, vendors and purchasers alike, for them to be able to go after their interest in these properties if things were to go south. As of now, they're both out of luck entirely. Sure.
Ms. Irwin, I do want to say thank you for bringing us attention. And I'm really pleased to know that your calls were answered and things were put into motion to get you your answers. I do want to acknowledge the fact that we do have the Register of Deeds, Nancy Burns, in attendance this evening. And Nancy, Ms. Burns, if you would care to come to the podium and share with the public what options might be available or how to educate what information we may need.
Well, we had a meeting the other day, and it was Melissa, Kathy, Ms. Irwin, and myself, and we had legal counsel there, Wendy Green. Unfortunately, our hands are tied. We're there to record documents, but I will tell you, she's right on target as far as legislation would have to be introduced. And don't get me wrong, Commissioner Burrows, and I know you're a representative, I always get scared when we create legislation. Where's Kathy? Oh, no offense, Kathy, but it scares me sometimes because, as Tom would say, or Commissioner Burrows would say, you create a legislation, but it can be butchered up there in Topeka, and then all of a sudden you've got something you don't really want. It doesn't fit us. I wish we could just make our own little legislation in the city and ignore Topeka sometimes. No offense, please. But she is right. But there is one thing we did at this meeting, which I need to go out and talk with Greg Talkin and and all of them out there in the code enforcement. and because they have access to our search engine, which when I came into office, you did not, delinquent tax didn't have access to our Laredo. Codes didn't, and Codes really needs that. That's really vital. But there's like 6 or 7 other offices that have access to it now. So we have about 130 some people on our Laredo system. So they can go in and look every day, because we are current in all our filings, if there's a deed out there. So what we do when a person does come in, and of course we have a lot of e-filings, and we'd have to address that. But when a person comes in with a deed, and we stamp it with it's called a parcel stamp. We put the parcel, then we ask them. I go, okay, where is the tax statement going to go to? And we write that on there. If it's the new person, and if that's a different address, like, oh, I would like it to go to Overland Park or Kansas City, Missouri, we put the address on there so they can get that tax statement to them. To me, that's a red flag. That's something I really need to show probably out there in codes. Look at that part. If it's a different than that, what that deed is, then I would suspect that is rental. This is just me talking here. That would be a red flag. Rental needs to go out there or send them a letter saying, is this rental property? I know this is kind of getting off the track of contract for deed, but I think that's a good mechanism for them to look at. Or is this property in a contract for deed? They can look at that address, and if it's different, I would say, yes, it's rental property, and are they in a contract for deed? Again, it's education. I will tell you, I can't tell you how many people have lost like $45,000, $35,000. They pay cold cash, and they come in and they want a deed, and now they have nothing on file, no contract, no affidavit of equitable interest, nothing. They have to go and hunt this person down, and we have to refer them to an attorney to go and help them get that property in their name, because they're not going to deed it over to them. And unfortunately, there's some bad people out there that do this. But the contract for deed is, there's a lot of contract for deeds that are good contracts, but I would have to agree with her that a lot of them aren't very good. But hopefully legislation can change that. But like I said at the meeting, you got to have your realtors on board. You got to have everybody on board when you get up there in legislation and present something like this on changing a contract for deed and what's required before they can even file it in my office. That would be some big legislation. And you'd have to have the Registered Deeds Association on your side too, but we talked about that. So, unfortunately, it's out there in the community that people don't file their contract for deeds, don't file an affidavit of equitable, they don't cloud that title. But then you have the people with contract for deeds that do file it, then it's defaulted. Now they have to get a deed, have that person sign over that deed to the property, and they can't find them. So it's a tough. Then you do a quiet title. But anyway, any questions to me?
Any questions? Seeing none, I would like to state that the seriousness of this issue, it's really appreciative that you would come forward and speak and educate us about the issue, for not only on Mrs. Irwin's behalf, but on those that may be considering a contract for deed, and what we may be looking forward to in the future, and how we can address that as a government committee.
Yeah. Now, when I do go out and speak at neighborhood groups, I tell them all these horror stories. If anybody's out there, you need to be protected. And of course, we have the property fraud alert, and that's only an alert that somebody's tampering with your property. And I try and push that to everyone that comes into our office, and get as much information out there on that. Anyway, thanks for having me. It's fun. I've never been to one of these.
Thanks for being here this evening and educating us, and thank you for what you do over there to ensure documents are filed properly and lawfully. That is the last, that concludes this evening's meeting. Yes, Melissa Bynum? I'm sorry, Melissa.
Wow,
Sorry.
I got elevated in status. Wow. No, just wanted to let the commissioners that are here tonight and Commissioner McCarron on the phone know that we will be working a 2020 SOAR goal related to this. Talked to some staff early last week on it, but while I was sitting here, emailed Nancy and Wendy just so we can get the language together correctly. But as we're working through that and updating our software as well, we'll work at incorporating all of this.
I anticipate seeing something. As I stated, this concludes our meeting for this evening. We will adjourn, and it'll be about 5 minutes, and we'll have provide the opportunity for Mr. Bryant from the BPU to join us, and then we'll convene the Economic Development Finance Standing Committee. 5 minutes. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I will now call the meeting of the Economic Development Finance Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is always welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You will have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. Please come forward to the microphone. You will be recognized, and for accurate recording purposes, we ask all present to speak directly into the microphone. At this time, I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call, Bryant.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
McGee. Townsend.
Here.
McKernan.
Here.
Burrows.
Here. There are no minutes to approve since our September 30th meeting was canceled. So with that, we have 8 items on the agenda this evening, and I will wait for our conferees to step forward. We do have item 1, which is the Foodie Park. It's the first amendment of the KC Foodie Park Development Agreement. I'll ask Catherine Cartar, Director of Development, Economic Development, to present this item. Sorry, excuse me.
No, not at all.
Trying to read ahead of myself.
Good evening, Catherine Carter, Director of Economic Development. I will just give a very brief summary of what this is and then hand it over to Richard Scavuzzo, who you all are very familiar with at this point. So this is the first amendment. The goal of this would be to postpone the closing date for Project Area 1 by 3 months, so from December 31st of 2019 to March 31st of 2020. The final plat for Project Area 1 has been approved by Planning Commission and the full commission, and so by all intents and purposes, we're kind of full steam ahead on this project, and I will let Richard go into a bit more details about the need for this, or the request for this postponement.
Richard Scavuzzo, Scavuzzo's Food Service. Just a brief update on the project. We are full steam ahead. We have our GC and our automation firm. We had a kickoff meeting about 5 weeks ago. They are going as fast as humanly possible. We've hired a brokerage and an owner's rep, Esky and Associates. And we have done quite a bit of work on phase 2, 3, and 4 as far as finding tenants, including a possible additional office building in phase 4. Really, the need for the extension kind of coincides with the delay from on the development agreement from the first vote to the last vote, and we're basically asking for that time to be extended. Is the gist of the reasoning.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Bryant.
So how would this affect phase 2, 3, and 4?
The timeline, the way I understand the development agreement is close of phase 1 indicates or starts the clock on all the separate phase 2, 3, and 4.
Commissioner Bryant, if I could just add to that, it would not affect the dates for phase 2. The development agreement has a closing date of December 31st, 2021 for phase 2, and this amendment does not touch phase 2.
So those 3 months would basically be caught up during that second phase.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there anyone from the public wish to address this item? Yes. If you'll please come to the microphone and state your name. You have 3 minutes to make your comments.
My name is Janice Witt. I'm from right here in Wyandotte County, KCK, born and raised. So I have a question, I guess that first off is going to go to Jeff. So what is the BPU obligation with the foodie park?
As far as I'm concerned, knowledgeable, there is none.
Okay. So, but they are required to pay their bill, their full BPU bills.
Yeah.
You said yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Is there any obligations or desire of the foodie park, or maybe I've missed it, to find out if there are people in the community who can work higher end jobs that may be available in this project?
If she could finish all her questions, and we can answer all at once, that'd be great.
Well,
If you would ask your questions or
3
your
minutes.
comments, and then there will be.
I don't know enough to do that, but if they can answer it, then I can move forward with the next question, because I've only got 3 minutes.
This is not a question and answer session, is it? Public comment.
Yeah, this is really a public comment. If you have concerns about the hiring practices of the company, I would, that's one thing, but ask how many they're going to hire. That's not what this is about.
Okay, so I guess my comment is there going to be, or is there a plan to establish some employment opportunities for the people of this community? It's not supposed to be a tough question, but apparently it is. So, I mean, what is the intent towards the Wyandotte County residents to, okay, skip it. I have a concern that's very much specific to this, so it won't even involve the foodie group. We in Wyandotte County have a problem being heard. We have 3 minutes, 4 minutes, however many, to stand up, and in that amount of time, we are required to know exactly what we want to ask. When the possibility is that we haven't been given information. If we ask for information through the proper channels, there are times when we are charged for that information, and most people are trying to pay their BPU, so therefore, they don't have extra money to give. So these questions that I'm asking that are not going to be answered at this point, which is fine, I understand, goes back to the point that the people in Wyandotte County have no say, no one to hear us, no one to stand up at a meeting and say, let's just hear these folks. Let's not see an entire group of people who have a concern walk away. If you call the mayor's office to request an appointment, you are then told no. Okay, I was. So that leads me back to my concern. So I have a presentation.
This is Donna calling from the office of Mayor Alvey. I was calling you back to let you know I did speak with Mayor Alvey regarding your request to meet, and he did let me know to tell you that at this point he will not be meeting just due to some past issues. And if you would like to give me a call back, my number here is 913-573-5010. Thank you.
Okay, that goes to the fact that we have no ability to be heard. I called Mayor Alvey's office and requested a meeting. I have never had a private meeting with Mayor Alvey. And at the last chamber meeting, you all were there, Mayor Alvey made a statement that I was standing before the commission lying, that he had his assistant call me, or that he had sent a message to me to call him back, that he was afraid to meet me in private because of some past issue. I have never met Mayor Alvey in private, ever. But he stood in that meeting and accused me of lying because I reached out in order to get information to help make decisions for those of us that live in Wyandotte County to understand the things that are being offered by our commission. We deserve access. The elected officials in this community are elected to speak our words, to understand our desires. We are to be heard, and that is failing. This recording that I just gave you is your mayor who stood at the last meeting, called me a liar,
Okay, Ms. Witt,
saying point blank that he did not plan to meet with me ever.
I would ask that you stay. This is for the Scavuzzo Food Park, so I would hope that your comments would be in relation to that subject matter tonight.
And they were, Mr. Burrows, because I was not allowed to ask the questions that I needed to ask in order to move forward.
Well, in response to not having an opportunity to be heard, you've had an opportunity this evening, and we hold public hearings just for this purpose. And so it's not that we deny and we're not listening, we are listening, and that's how this project was able to move forward and become a development in Wyandotte County, because the public had a chance through their neighborhood groups and through other organizations to come forward and voice their support for the project. In reference to the mayor, that's not an issue related to the Scavuzzo Food Park. So I do appreciate and understand you're wanting to bring it forward. But if you don't have any other comments in reference to the food park, I'm going to ask that we move on to the next conferee. I think we have another.
I have no problem with answering, with your statement. However, we do deserve to be heard even in regards to Scavuzzo's, and most of this community does not feel that they were heard. So with all due respect.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would care to speak forward from the public? Let the record show no one else has stepped forward at this.
At this time, we are able to respond to the question that was
Please do so.
brought up.
So as far as jobs, there's a whole plan for jobs, job creation. This whole project, as far as the commission's concerned, was based around jobs and bringing a lot of jobs to Wyandotte County. Scavuzzo's actually has an after-school program with Wyandotte High, which I believe we have nine students from Wyandotte High in that program now. Where they come and work an after-school program with us. We started that program, I believe, 3 years ago, and I think the only kids that are not involved in the program are the kids that ended up going to college. So it's a very successful program, and we want to engage even more with the Wyandotte community. The jobs that we're creating are not jobs that have been trained to yet. So Scavuzzo's will be doing their own training, and we fully intend to hire from the community. And we've also engaged with the commission on the transit center and being able to use the transit center to hire people on specific routes so that they will have transportation to our facilities.
Thank you, Catherine Carter. Anything else you'd like to?
That is it, if there are no questions.
If there's hearing none, this is a resolution adopting the First Amendment to the KC Foodie Park Development Agreement. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call Bryant,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKernan,
Aye.
and Burrows.
Aye. Okay, thank you, committee. Next item up is the Hilton Garden Inn. It is related to their project, and at this time, I would again recognize Catherine Carter.
Thank you very much. On this one, I will go through a brief presentation, and then we have two representatives from the Hilton Garden Inn able to answer any questions that you might have at the end. This is more of a kind of a reminder, as the last time we saw this was about a year ago, so I want to make sure all the facts are fresh in your mind before a vote. So the Hilton Garden Inn, obviously right downtown, about a year ago, this was approved for $4 million in bonds. This is industrial revenue bonds, sales tax exemption only, not property tax, just sales tax exemption for the renovation, which is all internal. The work has been started, and then as time has gone on over this past year, the scope has increased a bit, as well as general costs increase. So they are requesting an additional $1.5 million in bonds, as the project cost has increased to a total of $5.5 million. So once again, overall structure remains the same. IRBs, sales tax exemption. UG is not responsible for any of the bonds, for the payment of the bonds, as with all IRBs. And this is kind of an overview of the ordinance. So this is just an omnibus ordinance amendment, that would change the number from 4 million to 5.5. And I have Julie Nilsson, who's the Director of Sales, and Patrice Chisholm, who's the General Manager of the Hilton Garden Inn, to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Bryan. I'm sorry, Jeff.
So what has changed in the scope that requires the additional 1.5?
I think the change in the scope was that all of the renovation just got bigger and bigger. So now it's a complete renovation. They're taking out walls, they're putting in new drywall. They're changing out any of the structure that had any of the mold or anything else in it. So the bathrooms are 100% redone, the rooms are 100% redone, along with the entire first floor.
Will there be any improvements made to the parking garage?
I don't believe that the parking garage is part of our package.
Yeah, the UG actually owns the parking garage. Yeah.
Any other questions? Commissioner Townsend?
Well, I'm trying to understand, was it the scope that changed, or once the renovations began, there was more to that needed to be done as part of the renovations?
I think it was both.
Okay,
I
give me
think that the prices increased a little bit and the scope in the overall scope increased. So, walls were taken out. They're literally redoing every inch of that hotel. Yeah.
the walls were taken out from where? What are we talking about?
So they redid the drywall, anything that was mold or old that needed all of the wallpaper came down, and anything that was exposed behind the wallpaper, they ended up actually taking out all of that drywall. Any of the 2x4s or the wood structures that needed to be changed, any of the plumbing that needed to be changed, that was all completely redone.
So are all of the rooms, the guest rooms being redone as part of
Yes,
this renovation?
100%, yes.
And how many guest rooms does that include?
There's 147. We had 148, but we converted one to a boardroom.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Mr. Bryant?
What was the date of the last renovation? Do you know?
Was it 2012? Yeah, 2012.
Any other questions? Seeing none, does any member of the public wish to address this item?
Yes, please.
You will, again, state your name and residency, and you will be given up to 3 minutes.
Janice Witt, born and raised right here in Wyandotte County. I'd like to know if Hilton Garden Inn pays BPU. Do they pay their own BPU bill?
If you will pose all of your questions.
That's my question.
That's it.
When will we know the answer? Do we know?
No.
Yes, they pay their bills.
They pay their own BPU, full BPU? Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Let the record show nobody else step forward. Ladies, thank you. This is committee. This is the additional 1.5 million on the 4 million it's already been structured under the IRB. The UG, again, is not responsible for payment of the bonds. That falls back on the Hilton Garden Inn. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. I'd ask clerk call roll.
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Walters, Townsend,
Aye.
McKernan,
Aye.
and Burrows.
Aye. Thank you, committee. Next, item 3. We will wait just a minute. Ladies, I apologize for rushing through that. I didn't know that we had somebody here from Hilton Inn. Thank you for investing in our community. We will wait. Ready? Okay. Item 3 is the sale of temp notes, GOBs, and PBC revenue bonds. And tonight we have Debbie Johnson, Deputy Chief Financial Officer, is here, and she will be making our presentation this evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. We have just a small presentation on this item is for the sale resolution, which authorizes the sale of the 2020 general obligation bonds and temporary notes, and it also requests the Public Building Commission to issue revenue bonds. Just wanted to note that all projects that have been included have been approved by the Commission, were included in the Cmi P. They could be both new projects that are receiving funding for the first time, or they could be ongoing projects that are receiving additional funding, or the funding that they currently have is being rolled to a temporary note or a permanent bond financing. So here's just a breakdown of the amounts that we have in the 2020 sale resolution. We have the governmental projects totaling about 49 million. These are projects that would be paid back with property tax revenues. The enterprise fund projects total 88.5 million. These projects are issued as general obligation bond, but their primary repayment source is through sewer and sanitary sewer revenues. And then Public Building Commission projects, which are the county building projects, at 10.2 million. This is just a breakdown of the Cmi P budget that was approved by the commission. We're showing project amendments in 2019 show a net increase of $7.3 million. And we've just noted here, the original budget for all of the debt projects was $91.3 million. And in the 2019 amended, that went to $98.7 million. And for 2020, the total for all projects was $86.6 million. And we have these broken out by the city debt, the enterprise funds, public building commission, and special revenue projects.
And Debbie, may I ask, what was the additional $7 million for?
There were, I think I might have that in, let's see. I don't have the specific projects. About 15, this was a net change. There was 15 million in additional enterprise, so that would be sewer projects. I think on the city debt, there was only 1.8, but then the net, which brought it down to 7.3, if you'll notice on the special revenue projects, the original was 11 million, and in the 2019 amended, it's now 1 million. That project was the I-70 interchange project, which we took out of 2019 and then moved to 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, Turkey Creek, that's probably what it was. Yeah. Okay, please continue.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, actually, I think that one. Yeah, we did have, I think there was a project in here that was approved after the budget last year that was the elementary school that was about 2 million. That was probably a portion of this money. Yeah, it was a road project related to the elementary school.
The 7 million, the increase of the 7 million in,
From 2019 original to 2019 amended, yes.
thank you.
So the next two slides, what I have done is I've done a reconciliation on the temporary notes that we issued. This one is the governmental funds, and then I have another slide on the enterprise funds. What I did here was I started with last year at the same time, we issued a sale resolution for the 2019 bonds and notes that we were going to issue. And for the governmental projects, we authorized a total of $57 million. We issued $22.9 million in temporary notes, $14.5 million in general obligation bonds for a total of $37.5 million. So there were $20.3 million in projects that were authorized for debt issuance, but we did not issue the funding. And I did just want to note that these are not projects that are not moving forward. When we need a project to have budget authority and also debt authorization issued in order to be able to award projects that are eventually going to have debt funding. So we need the authorizations done, but if a project's going to take 2 to 3 years, we don't want to issue all of the funding at the beginning of the project and then just sit on the funds. So we issue the projects that we think are going to be spent within the next 12 months. And so that's what happened here. We didn't issue all of the funding that we were approved for because we knew it wasn't all going to get spent in 2019. So then what I've done here is just taken the temporary note issuance. I've added back in the funding that was not issued. We added in the 19, and I have a little bit more detail on the reimbursement resolutions in a future slide. Reimbursement resolutions are projects, most of these are annual projects that are in the budget and approved, but they haven't identified the scope of work, so we don't issue the funding till they identify the scope of work. Any amendments to the CMIP for 2019 and 2020, and the reason for this credit here is due to that large interchange project since we moved it out of 2019. Then I've subtracted out the 2020 reimbursement resolutions, subtracted out the PBC projects, and any other funding projects that were approved that did not have funding included in the sale resolution, as well as the finance costs, which brings me to the 2020 sale resolution for the governmental projects. And this is broken out in the resolution that lists all the projects totaling this amount.
Okay. So it's actually a reduction.
Go ahead.
Comments or questions?
Okay. Okay, this is the same reconciliation done for the enterprise funds. Same information provided here. We had 97 million in last year's sale resolution. We issued a total of 35 million for notes and bonds, meaning that we had 62 million in projects that were authorized that we did not issue the funding for. And then the same reconciliation bringing us to the 2020 sale resolution of 88.5 million for the enterprise fund, which is sanitary sewer and stormwater projects. This is a breakdown of the reimbursement resolutions. As I said, these are annual projects where we have, the projects have been approved, but they haven't identified the scope of work, so we don't issue them. So for 2019, last year, we did reimbursement resolutions for these 5 projects totaling $1 million. And so this year, we are adding them into the sale resolution because they've now identified the work that's to be done. These are the 2020 projects that are authorized, but we're not financing because they haven't identified the work at this time. And they total $2.5 million. Yeah, state law for the debt authorization, in order to be able to issue the temporary notes or bonds, we need to be able to identify the descriptions for the work that is being done. And since the work on these projects has not been identified yet, they're authorized, so we could issue once they identify. If we needed to issue funds in the future, we can issue that once they identify what the scope of the work is.
The sewer main extension for 2020, where is that? Do we know? Is that the new fire station?
I'm not sure. Okay. I don't think we have that detail, and I don't think anybody from Public Works is here.
That's fine. I was just,
We can get that information provided to you. Okay. It might be, yeah, it might be listed in there somewhere. Well, no, I was thinking it might be included in the debt authorizations, but if it's a reimbursement resolution, it could be included in the packet, the information that we've got. I'll check that out and see if we can find that. Okay.
Just aware of some things
Okay.
dealing with that.
This next slide is project funding that's been approved that we have not included in the sale resolution. So this 85.7 million are projects that have been approved, but we're not including in the sale resolution because we don't expect the money to be spent within the next 12 months. And we've broken this out between the governmental and the sanitary sewer projects. So on the governmental side, there's about 4.5 million in projects that we're not issuing. The projects are ongoing, and they have some funding issued, but we're not issuing all of the funding. We're holding off until they need the funding for the project.
So those numbers are just a portion of the total?
That's
Those
correct.
projects?
Right. Some of these, for instance, the police tow lot does have some money issued already on it, but the 2.4 million, I think the total authorization on that project is around 5 million, and we've only issued a portion of it. So the other portion, as the project moves forward and we get to the point where we need the additional funding, we'll issue it at that point. And then on the sanitary sewer, they have 81.2 million that we have not included. The largest is the Caw Point Biosolids project and the Walcott expansion. Those are the 2 largest projects. And they do have funding already issued on them, but this is additional funding that was approved in the budget, but we're not issuing the funding at this time.
The Caw Point Biosolids, is that contingent upon, I know that there was discussion with Kansas City, Missouri? So the spend will kind of be a push and pull between the 2 cities on when the timing will be?
Yeah, that project is currently, the negotiations with Cmi are underway, and they're progressing, but we don't expect we're going to be spending 51 million next year, likely in the subsequent years, so, yeah. And the delay in the police tow lot is largely related to land acquisition and finding the right spot for that. So, and we are in negotiations with a specific site at this time, but it hasn't been finalized yet. And to answer your question before, in the packet, under the project debt authorizations, it's in the, well, it has the page number 509. That's the page number of the proposed budget. But if you can find it at the bottom of page 509, related to the sewer main extension 2020 for $1.5 million. And it lists a number of intersections here. Georgia and Hutton Road, multiple parcels on 10th and Shawnee Drive and Fairfax Drive, 13th,
Thank you for that.
1300 block.
I was looking for it, but didn't look far enough. Okay.
So this is a tentative calendar for the 2020 bond issuance. So right now, we're at the standing committee. If this moves forward, the UG Commission would consider it on December 12th. And then we're looking at the sale of bonds and notes tentatively on February 6th with a closing date of the 27th. And then at that point, we would redeem the 2019 temporary notes as of March 1st. So the action would be to approve the sale resolution for the 2020 bonds and notes.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee? Comments? Does anyone from the public wish to speak and address this issue? Again, your name, residence, and you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
I bet it goes faster than that. My name is Janice Witt. I live in Wyandotte County, born and raised. I have tons of questions about this UG Commission action and a lot of other things that happen within our unified government. I make the statement that none of us in this room were offered a packet so that we could look at and understand any of the issues that we are discussing here today. I understand you don't want me to ask questions and wait on those questions, but we don't know what the questions to ask are until we get to see the information. You all are blessed, see. You get the packets from staff, so you all know the issues that are being put on the table, you know the issues that are coming up. Those of us who are in this community paying the taxes are given no opportunity to know what those are. I can show you right now, request information, next request information that I've requested from the UG so that I can understand and help my community understand issues that are being brought forth, even in a positive way. And I am sent a bill for that information. So once again, I state clearly, how are we as a community supposed to ask questions and be heard by the representation that we all vote to have when we have no say? You give us 3 minutes and tell us hurry up. And I understand, truthfully, y'all are underpaid and overworked. You don't get paid the pay that you need to be paid in order to do the level of work that is being required of you. And for that, I'm sorry. And hopefully at some point we'll change the charter and that will change. But I will say clearly, it is inappropriate for our commission, our boards, to expect those of us who live in this community to ask appropriate questions to get answers in the speed, in the time that you, Mr. Burrows, bless your heart, are demanding that we do.
Thank you, Mrs. Whip. Anybody else wish to speak to the issue? Let the record show nobody else step forward. At this time, this is a resolution authorizing certain public building and structure improvements and providing for the manner of paying for the same. So at this point, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Motion been made and second. I would ask clerk call roll.
Roll call, Bryant.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKernan.
Aye.
And Burrows.
Aye. Right. Item number 4 is a item dealing with the cash and investment policy. We'll take just a minute and allow our next conferee to come forward. This evening, we have our treasurer, Mr. Rick McKessick. And Mr. McKessick, if you'd like to introduce your guest for the committee, please.
Commissioner, with me is Andrea Parra. She is the Deputy Treasurer. She is also the Cash Manager and serves in that role for the Unified Government. And we are here to present to you for consideration the amendment to the cash investment policy, and I'll let Ms. Parra discuss that.
We didn't really have much to present in way of view, if you will. If you want to refer to the packet that we submitted, which is the investment policy adopted from last year, the edited version on page 2. It's the sole change that we are making this year. It's page 2. It would be section 6 titled Cash Management Committee, Delegation of Authority. 2 very minor changes we did. Some language changing following voting members instead of listing that language each time after the member. And then we added 2 non-voting members, which was the accounting manager and cash manager, of which are part of the committee currently and sit on that board and are there every quarter to assist and report on any changes in that policy.
So if I may, this is just formally recognizing 2 members onto the committee per an audit that was conducted.
That is correct.
Down to finding.
The legislative auditor conducted their regular audit of the Cash Management Committee policy for compliance, and it's been a matter of practice to have both the accounting manager as well as the cash manager in the meetings, and they simply made the recommendation that they be formalized and named in the policy as non-voting members. So it's really just, it's not a change in practice, it's amending the policy to actually match the practice.
Codifying. Okay. Any questions from the committee? Any members of the audience care to speak and address this issue? Let the record show nobody stepped forward. At this time, I would entertain a motion, policy change.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Townsend, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, I do have one question about this procedure overall, and maybe it is better addressed at another time. But in reading this and reviewing the cash policy and what the cash manager is to do in terms of placing our investments, my question really goes to what procedure, or is there a procedure that deals with how we make sure that any institution who wants to be a fiduciary for us or a holder of these funds gets a chance to do so? And secondly, are there any efforts that the UG, the cash management person under this policy, takes to ensure that smaller, minority, or women-owned banks or financial institutions get an opportunity to participate in this? And I know there's going to be a presentation later in the year, I think by our budget director, that will show where these investments are, not by there, someone will show us that. And I tend to see the same amounts in some of these institutions from year to year. So I'm wondering, how do they get an opportunity, if they choose to increase their holdings?
Commissioner, 2 years ago, we noted that we didn't have much diversity in the banks that were expressing interest in our investments when we would go out for bid. This led us to reach out earlier, it was in the spring, right? This spring, we reached out to every banking institution that had a location, a branch in Wyandotte County, and invited them to meet with us so that we could go through our process, our bidding process, and explain how they could become part of that bidding process. And we met with every single one of them, I believe, that we reached out to, and we met with all of them. Some banks simply didn't have an interest because it didn't fit their business model, and some aren't able to take bids in the level that we are bidding the money out for. However, by doing that, we did get a significant increase in interest, and we are now sending the bids to an increased number of banks each time this year. And we will be going through the process again. It's an annual process where we set banks up, but we will be reaching out to them again. Now, when we send the bids out, we've had a number that say, yeah, send them to me. We probably won't bid, but send them to me. So it has to meet their needs as well, but we've made a conscious effort to do that, to try to ensure that we've reached out and included as many of those as we can, because in our interest, or we believe it's our job to do that, because the more interest out there, then the better interest, more competitive rates that we'll get.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear there is some procedure in place, and it's an annual procedure. Has there been any thought to increasing the range of the outreach beyond Wyandotte County?
We have to follow the state statutes, which specifically state that we have to first offer those bids to Wyandotte County banks that have a location, a physical location in the county.
And then after we meet that, then what?
Well, the statutes are written fairly structured so that it usually has to fall into that area. There are certain things we can do if the banks located in Wyandotte County don't meet those bare minimums, but generally they do, according to state statute.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there was a motion and a second, and the motion was to adopt the recommendation put forward that would consider updating our policies to include the cash manager and the accounting manager as non-voting members of the cash management committee. I believe that is spelled out in the audit, and I've had the privilege of reading through the audit as a member of the audit committee, and I do know that there's some other issues that were in here that will be addressed soon. And will come forward with some additional policy recommendations.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, there's a motion. I would ask clerk call roll.
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKernan,
Aye.
and Burrows.
Aye. And thank you for your patience with us this evening. All right, item number 5 is the Special Revenue Fund Reserve Policy. And we do have Kathleen Von Atchen, who will be, she's our Chief Financial Officer. She will be making the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't have a PowerPoint. I thought we would just refer to the documents in the packet, which were published a week ago on the UG Clerk's website. So the packet for all of the agenda items for this committee were published over a week ago on the UG's website. So what I've included for here is some minor revisions to the special revenue funds operating reserve policy. And as you know, over the past 18 months, we've written together, rewritten most of the financial policies of the unified government. And there were a few small cleanup items that we decided to kind of hold off on so that we could discuss in more detail in the future. And this is one of them. In the previous policies, back 10, 20 years or so, these special revenue funds had certain range of a range of expenditures as delegated for its respective reserve. And tonight, I just wanted to propose to you that you consider changing that to make the reserves more consistent with the reserve language in the other areas, such as the general fund. So special revenue funds, we've talked a lot about that. Those based, how governmental accounting works is the state statutes require that if you collect a certain revenue that revenue is specifically designated for a specific purpose, then you're required to set up a separate fund. If the revenue does not have a statutory specific purpose, then it can be deposited in the general fund. So we have a reserve policy for the general fund, which is separate from this, and this only deals with all those special revenue funds, right? And so specifically, the changes are found on page 1 and 2 of the policy. There aren't any other changes elsewhere in the report, and they are shown in track changes in red. So, back before, the policy had presented a range. So, for example, the UG Technology Fund, it said that you should have a range of between 5 and 10% of expenditures. And I felt that was ambiguous or not very direct. So what I'm proposing is that we change the language so that there is that we will maintain a minimum target or minimum level fund balance of a certain percent or a certain amount. Now, so that's the change in section 4A, right? The other slight change is that in the general fund, we're now talking about reserves as a percentage. It's not, rather than percentage, we're talking about reserve targets as a month or 2 months of operating expenditures. So it's a nuanced kind of way of approaching it, but it's more illustrative of the need for liquidity in these various funds. So in reality, 2 months of expenditures equals 16.7%. But in reference to it, in order to be consistent with the general fund policy, I'm recommending that some of these percentage, or the target reserves be changed to reference months of expenditures rather than a percentage. On the second page, briefly, I just want to go over in total kind of what we're recommending. You can see that there's a list of all the special revenue funds, and so I'm going to kind of lump some of these together so that it's a little bit more understandable. So the special levy taxes, those are special revenue funds that are dependent on a property tax levy. That includes the Developmental Disabilities Fund, the elections, the health department, the mental health, and I think that's all of them. Yeah, those changes are recommended to change from the existing percentage range of 10 to 15% to 2 months of operating expenditures. And the reason for that is because each of those county funds support salaries and benefits. And so the need to maintain a certain reserve level is appropriate if you're paying folks out of that fund. So that's the rationale for changing that to the same as the general fund. So the next category of changes are the 3 technology funds. So that's the UG Clerk Technology Fund, the Register of Deeds Technology Fund, and the Treasury Technology Fund. Yeah.
I see no recommendation as to the reserve limit.
So the recommendation is to take out or to not include those funds in this policy at all. And the reason for that is that these are specific funds where they accumulate fee revenues from the respective area in order to spend it on specific capital or equipment acquisitions. It's very specific in state statute. The second reason is because the state statutes actually allow or actually require that the clerk, the treasurer, and the register of deeds, that they have actual authority over their budgets, and in fact do not need to include those funds as a certified fund for the commission's approval. So, we provide those 3 funds as part of the budget process for what the statute terms as informational only. So, the thing is that some of these funds accumulate funds over a number of years because the acquisition of the software or the equipment is very expensive. And so, and also the equipment doesn't necessarily deteriorate in a given, each and every year on an annual basis. It's acquired and then you utilize it for 5 to 10 years and then you have to replace it. So the thought is that those funds are meant to accumulate funds for future acquisitions. So that's the proposal here with those.
Any questions?
I think there's a couple other changes too, but.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. So like your special street and highway went from 3 to 5% to 3 months?
Okay, well, I haven't talked about those yet.
Oh, okay, I thought you were.
Commissioner Townsend?
Well, let's just proceed with Ms. Financial's presentation.
I'm almost done, yeah.
No problem.
So going down the list a little bit, the library district, I am recommending that we exclude from this policy because as it as well, the district actually sets their budget on their own without, and the board of, it's kind of complicated, but to set a reserve policy for the library district, when the library district board is the one that sets their own budget, it doesn't make sense to me. So the last 2 remaining three actually remaining items. Well, the special asset fund, I am recommending, and the tourism and convention fund, I'm recommending be excluded because those are funds that aren't operating in nature, but they are actually established in order to collect assets that we have acquired, especially the special asset fund, and it's sort of a revolving fund. So the amount that's in those funds, the fund balance can be rather large, but it fluctuates from one year to the next depending on when you acquired the asset and then in the future what kind of special project was undertaken. So it's not an operating type fund. So, and then the last is the debt service fund. So debt service funds are not actually special revenue funds at all. They are debt service funds. And really what in governmental accounting, the only amount that should be accumulated or left at the end of the year in a debt service fund is some residual amount between the amount collected for debt service and the amount spent for debt service. So there really shouldn't be much of a reserve in there at all. So to set some sort of limit didn't make sense to me either. So the street and highway fund, yes, I did want to talk about that one a bit. So the street and highway fund is supporting about 40 FTE right now, and about how many? 70, right? I got distracted. Sorry. So there's about 70 FTE in there, and I've noticed that revenue source, which is highly dependent on the state which is a gas tax that is collected by the state and then passed on to us, that has been a declining revenue source over the years, and so I have some concerns about that. So that's why I've recommended 3 years instead of 2, or 2 months instead of 3.
And the environmental trust went to 100%. Is it a small fund that we're?
Oh, yeah, so, thanks, I appreciate that. So, okay, because, I haven't touched on some of these other ones, so. All right, the environmental trust is, so that fund is actually established to accumulate revenues or resources in order to have those on reserve in case there is some sort of accident with what was previously the landfill and has since been mitigated. There's a legal requirement that we have to keep an amount of money on reserve in case something, catastrophic happens. So in reality, there really shouldn't be any reserve. It's not really an operating fund, and it's supposed to be to keep the money there until the legal requirement ends, which I think is around 2026 or so, maybe 27.
So, jumping back up to the special street and highway, is that a very large fund?
It's about $7 million a year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's similar in, it has similar functions as the special dedicated sales tax fund, which is around 10 to 11 million a year. That supports 50 FTE. So I've recommended that at 2 months of operating. It's similar to the general fund.
If I may, Kathleen, I have a number of questions, and I don't want to take up the committee's time this evening. I'm going to ask our counsel here, what happens if we take no action on this evening?
Well, this was listing approval and so it have to be postponed until next month. I'm not sure if the timing of this is time sensitive or not.
So I provided with you the opportunity to act on it with a resolution. Should you not have any further questions, but if you did, then you can postpone it to whenever. There's no, I'd prefer to have this all resolved prior to the next budget process, so.
Which begins when?
Commencing, I mean, for you, sometime in, prior to April or May, so.
Committee, I know I have a number of questions. I don't know how many questions you all may have. I'd like to know who has some questions that I'll have is who has the authority on the technology funds to expend those funds. If we've had to, and in the past, include them in the budget, and through your statement that they will now have the agency director or person in charge be able to do that. That's different than what we've been doing in the past, and I'd like to know the total of those funds and how much savings has been generated from going from the percentage to 2 months, or how much more needs to go into those funds. There's a number of questions I have, so I'm just not comfortable with the information this evening. Would hope that we could have ongoing discussion and find some comfort level with the amount of changes that are being proposed. We just went through these last year, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so, so last year, we did not change any of these ranges at all. These remained as they have been for about 10 years. So, and I think it's great, I think it's great to postpone this to January because I believe the committee's meeting around, the third week of January. So by then, we could actually have some year-end 2019 figures for these specific funds, and then you can see, what the change would be.
And I would hate to take this forward with full commission, not fully being able to vet this information before us. I know I have some questions. I would entertain a motion that we table these until a further date.
I so move.
Yeah, second.
That we have a motion, I would ask, we have a motion on the table to table these. I didn't make it date certain so that we could bring this forward once we find a comfort level with all the changes. I mean, it's only 1/2 page, but I do have the language forces me to ask some questions. So we have a motion on the table. I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call Bryant,
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKernan,
Aye.
and Burrows.
Aye. Thank you, committee, and thank you,
Chairman,
Kathleen.
Could I just make a comment also?
Sure, Miss-
I'm glad you brought that up. I also have some questions, and I'll just let you know what the subject matter of my comments might be in preparation for maybe a work session coming up. When we reviewed these last year, my recollection was a lot of these funds had excessive reserves, but this policy really only addresses the minimum reserve that they need to have, and I wonder if we shouldn't address what we do if we have too much money in these funds. Should we also set a maximum and then some sort of procedure to correct if we have too much? The other question I have, and this is honestly a question, all these funds that you have taken out of the policy, it kind of leaves us with no direction. We as a commission approve the library district funds, for example. And I assume that we don't want to just be a rubber stamp. I mean, the way the legislation is set up, it's our obligation to review and approve that fund and all these funds. But if we don't have any policy on it, what are we supposed to do? Just rubber stamp whatever is put in front of us? So I think we should have a discussion about that. So those are the subject matters that I might like to discuss if we have our work session. Thanks.
Thank you, and that is, we did have much discussion on those items that were before us, and we spent a tremendous amount of time and energy going through the policies, and these were the sections that a number of the members had questions about. So I do appreciate the indulgence of the committee to postpone this until we get some more answers to the questions that we propose. And I may ask that the committee members, if you have specific questions, write them down and we'll send them to Kathleen, and we'll have an opportunity at that time to collectively meet and look them over. Okay. Thank you, committee. Next item on the agenda is item number 6, third quarter budget to actual. And the reason why I didn't ask if a member of the audience had a question in reference to that is because we weren't taking action. So. And if I may, I'd just like to state earlier that there was reference made that this information is not available. It is available on our website. And so you can get on the website, go to the agenda packet, go to your meeting packets, and it will have that information laid out. You can also go into each agency and department and see that information is coming before the commission. Commission members do that because we don't want to carry paper around with us all the time. So just as a public announcement, that majority of that information is on our website.
But it is not there. It is not there. All due respect, I agree with you, but it is not there.
It was, yeah, it is.
Next item on our agenda is our third, it's number 6. It's a third quarter budget to actual report. And tonight we have Reginald Lindsay, Budget Manager, and he's here to present. Reginald? Mr. Lindsay, it's all yours.
Thank you. I believe Kathleen is going to start out.
Okay. My apologies, Kathleen.
No. So Reginald Lindsay is our budget manager. Yes, she's going to be presenting on the expenditure side, and I'm going to start on the revenue side. And also kind of give you an overview of the general fund. This is a consolidated general fund overview, which includes the city, to combine city, county, and the consolidated parks fund all together. And this is on the first page of the report we prepare every quarter. And as you can see, what we're doing here is we're looking at the current year budget compared with the current year budget from last year, and then how much we've collected and spent through the third quarter this year compared with how much we collected and spent last year. The third quarter is ends September 30th, so that's 9 months. So 9 months out of 12 months is 75% of the year. So as you can see, we've collected 80% of our total budgeted revenue so far. That's pretty typical because we collect property tax early in the year. So that's why it's higher than the 75% target. On the expenditure side, we've spent roughly 71% of the total, which is consistent with the expenditure level through the third quarter last year, as you can see here. Net allocation and transfers are at only 25%, but that's because typically we do a lot of those transfers at the end of the year. So we plan to end the fiscal year with a cash balance of $23.5 million. At the moment, we have $45 million, and that is because, in our fund balance, and that's because our revenues we collected earlier in the year than anticipated, or then, because the revenue collection is not consistent from one month to the next, similar to expenditures. And then expenditures are collections or spending on the expenditure side is slightly below the target at 71%. All right, so the next two slides just segregate the the two major funds, the city general fund revenues and the county general fund revenues. This chart has budget to actuals with the budgeted revenues. These are the major revenue categories budgeted in the city general fund, totaling $148 million. This is the amended budget. It is that was amended in July. So far this year, we have spent this level at $112 million, which represents 75% of the total. So one thing I want to point out to you is that property tax is at 101.1% of the budgeted level. And that is because we collect pretty much all, and then a little bit more, of all our property tax at the beginning of the year. Sales tax is exactly at the target level of 75%. That is because as part of our current amended budget process, we reduced the sales tax estimate down from a higher number, which I can't remember offhand, to $43 million. So the revised revenue estimate for our sales tax is performing well. Some other areas, you'll see that, transfers are down because we often do these transfers at the end of the year. So it's only at 50%. This chart over here, or graph, shows this line. This is where the target is. And it compares with the level of revenue collection for that same period last year. So you can see property tax last year was collected at basically 100%, and this year as well.
Kathleen, if I may, to expedite this a little bit, what we've seen is an increase in revenue already ahead of last year's projections, except for the intergovernment, and this is because it's only the third quarter presentation. Doesn't include the fourth quarter.
That's correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yep. Okay. All right. This is actually, this chart right here, this graph here, this is the data for this graph. So this is a comparison of the collections, of the revenue collections by category for 18 and then 19. And so here's the difference.
Kathleen, we're still using the 32,497 as a conservative figure because that's what we said in the budget, but we do see revenue coming in a little higher than expected at this particular time. I believe if you look at the previous slide,
Now, what do you
the
say?
sales tax down at the bottom.
32, yeah, 32 is how much we've collected in sales tax so far this year.
But last year's sales tax was down. We didn't hit our mark. This year, we are, well, you're comparing last year to this year, third period.
Yeah, this,
But not actual numbers.
Not actual numbers, right?
this,
Percentages.
no, this is, okay, this is the budget, and this is how much we've collected this year. This is how much we collected last year, and this is how much we've collected this year. And so this is how much less we've collected during this period. And so we're down $1 million from the amount that we collected last year through September.
But we're up almost 1.6 million total.
That's that 1.5, yeah, right here. Mhm. Yep. And that's because charges for services have gone up. Okay. Now, on the county side, it's similar, but not entirely, because the county is much more dependent on property tax than the city general fund. So all the property taxes, 38.3 million, has been collected. You know, and it exceeds the 37.9 million that we budgeted in that category. Sales tax only amounts to 5 million. But it's also consistent. It's met its 75% target to the budget. So as a result, we've collected 91% of the budgeted revenue in the county general fund. This chart compares third quarter to prior year with third quarter this year. And you can see that, again, here on the sales tax side, it's a little bit different because actually here the sales tax is pretty consistent. Slightly lower.
But we are ahead in total from last year.
That's right. We're $3 million higher than last year.
I would say some of that is probably due to the fact that we didn't lower the mill.
Yes, that
And,
is very true.
And the additional interest income.
Yeah.
As well as the increase in sales tax, although we're still falling, there's concerns about the overall total that will come in. We took a conservative number last budget, if I remember correctly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a key point. See, we reduced the mill in 19 on the city side. That's why the property tax is pretty much the same. But on the county side, there was no mill reduction, so 2.8 million in additional revenue through this quarter is reflected here. Any questions on the revenues before I pass it on to Reggie for expenditures?
No, I think it's somewhat good news.
Current slide, what we have is expenditures for the 2019 budget. We have two different views. In the upper right-hand corner or upper left-hand corner, we have budget to actuals, comparing the 2019 budget to what we have actually spent. And then in the lower right-hand corner, we're comparing the 2019 budget to the 2018 actuals. So we can see we have a number of categories here in the expenditure budget. We have personnel, we have services, and we have supplies. Personnel being our largest category. Here, this is where we pay for our salaries, also our overtime. And also, these is where we have payouts when people retire or when they leave the unified government. Also, this is where we pay our pensions. And also, any penalties for pensions that we have to pay comes out of here. So, as Kathleen covered earlier, the target where we should be at is 75%. For expenditures with 75%, we should be below 75%. So we can see here percentage of budget spent. The total categories is 71%. And we can see personnel, which is our largest category, is at 72.5%. Then our services category is at 74%. And here services is our second biggest category. This is where we pay for our transit contract, also our trash contract, and this is also where we purchase a lot of our software out of. And if we go down here and look at the comparison with the 2018 actuals, we can see that we have spent $2.8 million more than we spent last year. And of course, we do have a larger budget, so that's one of the reasons we have spent more. I'm going to go over to the next slide. Next slide, this is the county general fund. And basically, again, in the upper left-hand corner, we're comparing the 2018 or 2019 amended budget with the third quarter actuals. And we can see we have a $64 million budget, and we have pretty much the same categories: personnel, services, supplies, grants, claims, and capital outlay. And personnel, again, being our largest category, and services being our second largest category. And we see both of these are below the 75%. Personnel is at 73%, and services at 70%. Some of the things that we pay out of here are bigger contracts that we pay out of services are our inmate medical, and then our inmate housing is also paid from here. And as we go down and look at comparison to 2018 actuals, we can see we have spent $2.1 million more than we spent last year. And one of the things that goes on here again is the budget is larger, so that's one of the reasons we're up over $2.1 million. Any questions on either the city general fund or the county general fund?
No, just the observation that even though we are spending $2.1 million, the fact that we didn't lower the mill and the sales tax has come in to ensure that we have the monies available to continue to spend at the level we're spending.
That is correct. Current slide shows the other 7 tax levy funds that are not the city general fund or the county general fund. And basically, this slide on the left-hand side, we have revenues, and then on the right-hand side, we have expenditures. And kind of have a comparison where the target here on the revenue side is that we bring in more than 75%. And we can see we're at 79, almost 80% for all the tax levy funds. And then over the expenditure side, the target is to be below 75%, and we can see here that we are below, and we're at 74%. And here we can kind of see, kind of cover both revenue side. This is the 2019 amended budget, and this is the 2019 actuals for the third quarter, and then this is the percent of budget. And then over here on the expenditure side, this is the 2019 expenditure budget, and then the year-to-date for September 30th, which ends the third quarter. And again, we can see we do have a city bond and interest fund, which is 102%, which all the spending has been done out of this budget. So, but we can see all the rest of them are below 75%.
And these are some of the funds that we were talking about earlier in the policy.
This particular chart here shows our other 19 funds, which are either special revenue funds or enterprise funds. On the left-hand side, we have the revenues in the blue here. And here, again, we have the 2019 amended budget, and we're comparing what was actually spent for the third quarter. And we see a percentage of the budgets. And we can see in these budgets also that we are over the target of 75%. We're at almost 78%. And then over here, this is expenditure side in orange. We have the 2019 amended budget. And then next to it, in the next column, we show what was actually spent in the 2019 third quarter. And the target here is that we be below 75%. And we can see down here at the bottom, we're almost at 68%.
So, Mr. Lindsay, if I'm reading that correctly, we plan on spending just under 21 million more in 19 than what we did in 18 at the same time.
Well, this particular chart right here doesn't have anything for 18. This is 29.
I apologize. I jumped. I was looking at as a comparison. I see where we're at. I apologize. Ignore the question. I'm looking at another page.
But we are planning to, the budget is 371 million or 372 million for expenditures, and while the revenues are only 350. So there is a difference of $22 million there. And that's because many of these, especially the enterprise funds and some of these other funds, have fund balance that we're going to be utilizing for one-time items like capital projects and other equipment acquisitions. So if that's maybe what you were asking, Commissioner.
I didn't look at the top to see the amended 2019. Comparing that with the 2018 third quarter period, but there is a $21 million difference in this budget last year. Any other questions, comments?
I just have
Mr. Bryant?
a comment more. Or I guess a question, do we really expect to spend another $27 million in this year, in the third quarter or fourth quarter, on the sewer system?
There probably will be some funds left over, but there will be some more spending. When we get into the fourth quarter, we do end up starting more projects, and there will be some more expenditures on some of the projects. So.
Yeah, I know that it's a hot topic to work on it. That's why I'm just wondering why, if we're lagging behind from where we expected to be this year, or we just have not expended as many dollars as we expected.
There will definitely be some funding left over. We probably won't spend the whole $51 million.
Any other questions? Anybody from the public? Are we finished with the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the public here to make a comment?
My name is Janice Witt. I am a citizen of Wyandotte County, have been my whole life. My concern is that if we continue to give 100% abatements, we will continue to be in a deficit when it comes time to take care of home of our fiscal responsibilities. It is my opinion that Doug Bach has made horrible mismanagement decisions and has left our city in a horrible bind. It's my opinion that Doug Bach must go. Sounds to me like these fine ladies and gentlemen right here should be in place to take his position, maybe to dig us out of the hole that he has buried us in. Doug Bach must go.
Okay, anyone else care to speak? Let the record show nobody else step forward. This requires no action. This was for information only this evening. And so the last item on our agenda this evening is the public comments section. And we have the appearance of Tisha Mank. Sorry, Ceci Mank. Oh. I apologize. Did I jump ahead? I apologize, Ms. Mank. You may have to wait a minute. I jumped ahead I missed an item. Sorry, committee. Thanks for keeping me on point. Item number 7, third and fourth quarter budget revisions.
Well, there's no presentation on the screen for this. There are the documents that you already have. There are 2 sheets, one for the budget revisions of $10,000 or greater for the third quarter, and then one for budget revisions of $50,000 or greater for the fourth quarter. And I'm going to start with the budget revisions of $10,000 or greater for the third quarter. So basically what we have happen is when we in departments want to move $10,000, we have to send a form to the county administrator's office to make sure he approves it. If it is over $50,000 and it has something to do with running operations, it also has to be signed off by Mayor Alvey along with our county administrator. So basically in the third quarter, we had 4 budget revisions that happened. 3 of them were from the police department and 1 of them was from the sheriff's department. And then there also was the one for the sheriff's department was done outside of their, or the one for the police department was done outside of their budget, and it was done from contingencies.
So all of these amounts were dealt with for the public safety budgets of those particular agencies. Committee, these are the requests that we made early on of the budget committee earlier this year when we asked these to come by on a quarterly basis instead of end of year as a cumulative numbers. So I really appreciate you doing that because we have a chance to review those independently of being an aggregate number. So thank you for that work. Are there any questions from the committee?
And then there is a second one, which I talked about, which is the budget revisions of $50,000 or greater, which you all requested they come within the time that we request them from the mayor. And so basically what that's what these are in front of you.
So the largest one being the 300,000.
Yes, for water pollution. And basically what we had going on there was they had pipes that broke that bring oxygen into the plants. And they had to bring in oxygen another way.
And then we had the operating for the police department, another $50,000 expenditure. Public safety, health and safety. So very well done. Appreciate bringing those up. Committee, any questions, comments?
I'd like to know what item 3 on the county general mileage reimbursement for dispatch relocation. Do you know what that might be?
Yes. So basically, we're remodeling our dispatch center, and the workers at the dispatch center have to drive to another location, so they're reimbursed for their mileage.
$40,000?
Yes. Yeah, so basically each and every employee there is reimbursed. So we may not spend that whole $40,000, but that is the funding that we put forward for it.
It's over the course of a number of months, so, right, hold on.
Explain that to me again. So they had to work at a different location?
Yeah, so basically, we're having a remodel done with our dispatch center.
Yes.
And the remodel displaces those employees where they have to drive to Johnson County's dispatch center. So they are reimbursed for driving out to Johnson County's dispatch center. And as Kathleen said, it is over amount of time.
I have a question about the oxygen for the treatment of waste. So has the pipe been repaired?
Yes, it has. Yes.
Okay. Again, this is for information purposes only. Any members of the public want to make a comment about, have any comments in reference to this issue?
Yes, I actually have a question. I know you're not going to let it be answered, but I have a question. That
Could you
is,
please identify yourself?
my name is Janice Witt, and I'm a member of Wyandotte County. First of all, y'all, I really appreciate y'all for being here, because it is late and we tired, so yay for our commission. I have a question, though, on this. It said police and fire put in for a change, so does that mean there was an increase of the, from the budget given to police and sheriff, I believe is what we said? And if so, what is that amount?
So there was an increase to their budgets, but it was done within our budget constraints that we have. And so basically, it was done for money from one line item to another in the police department. And then in the sheriff's department, that was the same thing that happened.
So there really wasn't an increase, it was just moved from one place to another? Okay, that I understand. The next question for you would be, so that we were 70 officers down, where is their income, where is their salary being placed in this budget? And what does it look like? We should have a pretty significant amount in that, on that budget line for employees who are not working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there are some personnel savings from that, but with us being down, there are also like overtime that we do have to pay. So that would be in our personnel category. So the budget report that we were going through earlier, we kind of touched on like personnel in the city general fund.
Okay.
That's where the savings would be. But when we do have savings with policemen not working, there are people that have to make up for that on the police force, and they get paid overtime for it.
So those unhired positions are still being paid to somebody?
Well, not all the unpaid positions, but so a portion of it also goes to overtime for people.
Can I get your card and call you so that everybody can go home and I can get that information?
Yeah, I don't have a card on me right now, but
Okay.
I can get you one.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to the item? Show nobody else to come forward. This was again for information only. Thank you for those that presented this evening. As I stated earlier, we do have our last item for the evening is the is to see her Mank. To see her Mank. I really do try to pronounce people's names properly. I apologize if I've offended in any way.
That's correct.
That you are here to speak tonight about the Northeast Master Plan and BPU bills.
Oh my
And you
God.
will have 5 minutes to make your comments. I would ask that you keep them on subject, as that's what you've requested to talk about.
Yes, sir. So the Northeast Master Plan was completed in 2018 per the website that we're redirected to, called the Historic Northeast Midtown Association. On the website, it was two links entitled Chester Owens Open Letter and a message from a founder by Dorothy McField. No doubt, two pillars of Wyandotte County, or can you hear me?
Yeah.
No doubt, two pillars of Wyandotte County, not just the northeast side. On that website, the two links couldn't be accessed. You only get an error message. Like a lot of the other things, you only get, can you guys hear me? Ms. Townsend, you're looking at me like you can't hear me. So you get two error messages. Through some investigation, I found out that it was because they were unhappy or the letters were not in favor of the Northeast Master Plan or some of the Northeast Master Plan. They felt like that maybe some of it was pushed on them by the unified government and its representatives. A lot of people feel like it's a regentrification agenda going on the Northeast side. As I read through the acknowledgments and stuff, I noticed that only two people actually lived or either, and this is only in the acknowledgments, only two people actually lived or either owned a business on the Northeast side. And it made me think back to the meeting that I had with the land bank, the community meeting that we had with the land bank where it was an economic development representative there who said to me that she assured that they had reached out to the community for every one of those meetings during the creation of the Northeast Master Plan. But my question on that day and still today is exactly what community members did they reach out to? A lot of my family lives on, matter of fact, all of my family lives on the Northeast side of town. And I went around asking them and some friends that I grew up with, did you receive an invitation? None of us can recall receiving that invitation. So it begs the question, really, who had the final say in what was included on the Northeast Master Plan, or was the master plan already completed before you guys ever asked for the community's input? We, the people, should have had the final say as to what we wanted and needed in our community, not what other communities wanted, and certainly not what appeals to other cultures. This is a historic place for the descendants of former slaves and their families, our first stop at freedom, and it should represent that history with our art, our culture, our music, education, including Black history courses, job training, business ownership. All these things will bring employment and home ownership to the Northeast side. As everyone can already see, this area in Wyandotte County lacks a lot of attention and tender loving care. A new grocery store would have been or should have been the first thing accomplished on the Northeast side of town. However, as we know, it might as well be the last. According to the Northeast Master Plan, the Northeast side produces $36 million. I'm not sure if this includes the businesses in Fairfax or not. However, I doubt that. If the unified government invested 15% of that $36 million back into the Northeast side just one time, and then after that continue to show the love and attention that it shows all the other areas of Wyandotte County, it will look and thrive just like the rest of Wyandotte County. 15% of $36 million is a very small amount compared to what you guys have already invested into, like busted and bad investments that have failed over and over again in Wyandotte County. So it would seem like that wouldn't be a lot. The residents of Wyandotte County can see that our officials, some of the past ones, but most of the present ones now, have no problem breaking their backs and bending over backwards to invest in other areas of Wyandotte County. And not all those investments have been good ones, yet you still do them. But it seems like it's pulling teeth when we ask for projects to be done in the Northeast side. The Northeast side, as you can see, has been neglected for far too long.
You have 10 seconds.
Okay, what I really can't understand is how we have officials who actually live in those areas, who drive to and from work, and not get sad, mad, or even outraged and disgusted for the lack of care and attention shown to the historic and to our historic place, our historic Northeast side. Shame on it all.
Time has expired. Thank you. Anyone else care to address the committee? Seeing none, that concludes our meeting for this evening. Thank you for your attendance.
Go home.
And we are adjourned.
There, see?